Morning, everybody. I'm super excited to welcome Justin Zimmerman from Partner Playbooks. Justin, welcome to our podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Sagata. It's been a long time coming.
I know. We've been connected for a while. We've been going back and forth. I'm super excited to have you as a panelist in our Austin event. But today it's about you. There's a lot to talk about. I know you've been taking a very different approach to this segment. But before we get into that, would you take please a minute and introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. Hey, everybody who doesn't already know me. I'm Justin Zimmerman, and for the last 3 years, I've been approaching partnerships different than how most people think about them. And today we're going to talk about those things that I put into place that have brought me to companies like HubSpot, Crossbeam, a number of other great companies like 360 who are starting to wake up and realize that the power of partnerships is consistency and commitment, not just one-off events and programs. And so I'm going to be walking through how I got there. Part of the way was as a marketer back in the day, I focused on direct response copywriting, understanding the language and the pain points and the problems as a marketer's approach to partnerships. So that way, when people read, hear, and see things, you're speaking in a way that resonates with them in an engaging way that helps them move forward towards the journey of solving them, aka the buyer's journey. And so my approach to partnerships that we're going to walk through today is a marketing and conversion based approach. That's what everybody kind of wants today, leads and sales.
That is awesome. So, but I want to talk a little bit about your journey till this point, right? So, can you tell us a little bit about where you have been? How did you get started? What gave you the idea? Let's just kind of dial back maybe 5 years, 10 years, go back as far as you want to go.
Sure. So let's see here. 2007, you can probably find a picture of me, a little less handsomer than I am now in the beginning of my marketing career. And at the time, Google AdWords were just coming about. PPC was really new. SEO was also kind of having its rise, but I never actually got into those things. Those were not areas in which I spent time or ever got good at. But the thing I always was good at is making connections at companies who had similar customers and audiences, making deals with those companies to do marketing events and cross promotion. And I always found that why go to a third party to get your customers and audience when you can go directly to companies who have those people who you are good fits and matches. There was no Crossbeam at the time, but you kind of knew who those companies were, and you could pick up a magazine, flip to a directory of sorts, and then use a telephone and email to make a call, make a conversation, and launch great, fantastic marketing campaigns. And honestly, nothing's really changed since those days. Great companies have great customers, find those great companies and make deals with them to align your interests.
So, have you been always in sort of the channel and partner network, or did you work on the direct side, or?
Pretty much always partnerships and we'll call it networking with companies to build big audiences and cross promotion.
Okay, so let's take out the social media equation that happened last couple of decades because that's a big effect, how partners connect or companies connect with their partners and etc. Let's dial back a little bit. What was the mode of engagement when you think about 2 decades ago or a decade ago? How did these networks, come together?
It was primarily email. There was really like not the level of sophistication and audience and reach at the time. LinkedIn was a tool you used to like literally connect with someone to see if they were a first degree connection. It wasn't a blogging platform. It was a true networking platform that you were using to see who knew who. And boy, has things changed and I would say gotten better. Side note, email still one of the number one, depending on the influencer or person making the posts, best performing medium, generally speaking, to the day. And so again, great companies or great lists of customers and fantastic email and copywriting, those things still just outperform almost everything else out there from a direct, measurable, and go-to-market motion between partners.
Makes sense. So let's talk about today, right? So you
Sure.
have this grand vision of putting together partner playbooks, and you and I were chatting a few minutes ago. So kind of walk us through what that is. How did you come up with this? What kind of traction you're getting with that framework? I'd love to know
Sure.
more.
So, Partner Playbooks essentially is a media site that is designed to, in the partnership space, reach out and impact all the different forms of partnerships that are out there and provide a place for those particular audiences to come and engage with me. And it is, if you think about it, a media strategy first And then people don't know this, but there is also an agency strategy behind it. And so when you own an audience, or when you control the audience, or when you have access to audience, companies will approach you to see, hey, how can I get in front of that audience? And so by building partnerships to drive the media side, then that also then becomes its own self-fulfilling prophecy and inbound demand gen engine that then drives people's awareness of the other services that I offer. One of those behind the scenes, which is something I've been working on for probably 3 years, and I just made a post about it recently, or at the time of the recording here, around how about 3 years ago, I left my job. I had a vision of how I wanted partnerships to work and function. There wasn't necessarily the same view and agreement and alignment. And so I said, well, I'm going to go off and do it on my own. And so for the last 3 years, I've been building this concept, which is a little bit nicer than, there's two names for it, the App Alliance, but then more, I would say, commercially resonating is what I call the Partner Pod. Partner pod concept, and everyone's going to get this right away, is what if you had 3, 4, 5, 6 top performing partners, and you had a resource dedicated to staying in connection, in touch, and aligning those partners, sales and marketing, not just every once in a while, but a dedicated resource that was integrated across all the teams that continually found ways to get on the marketing calendar, imbue you into their registration flows, put co-sell opportunities in front of the sellers, and strategically align as an alliance of apps oftentimes. And there are also solutions partners in there that play a role in well. In fact, actually, 360 Insights just hired me to come in and help them orchestrate this whole motion with them and their partners in an upcoming event that actually has legs beyond that are allowing us to go from demand gen to pipeline.
Awesome. So let's double click a little bit this whole notion of putting together, 5 or 7 partners together. Can you talk about what are the attributes you kind of look together to create this pod? Are there similarities or dissimilarities, especially when you move from a brand to a brand? Does that composition change?
Yeah, great question. So there's the ideal, like in everything, and then there's the actual. And so ideally, there are 2, 3, let's say 4 key criteria that when trying to form your own partner pod, you want to look to the other partners to see if they have, or in my case, as the orchestrator, constructor, and manager of a pod, initiator of them, I'm looking for. And so obviously, one is you want to find companies that have non-competing ICP aligned products. And so if you're a PRM, right, it would be really great if you had like a Crossbeam tool, and then maybe an affiliate tracking tool if your PRM doesn't have affiliate, and like how do you kind of complete the technological puzzle on behalf of your customers through partners. And so first and foremost, you really want to have ICP alignment and good, better together story technologically. Again, solutions partners can play a role in this as well. The next thing is it really does help, and this is where the ideal side of it comes into play, is can everybody in some range or variance drive an equal amount of attention through their different audiences, whether it's their own customer list, their own blog list, their own internal pop-up notifications, or if they happen to have like great influencer relationships with people like Jay McBain or Scott Brinker, right? Like there's an orbit and cluster of like how much influence can each partner drive. Once you really have those 2 components in place, and I would say the third one is a commitment to having regular go-to-market motions that fit on the calendar and are, I will say, sanctioned. There's alignment, that big word that we all hear as partners, to bring this to market, and then to have that marketing flow through into the different, we'll call it follow-up channels. And I guess there's another one is like, if you don't have a follow-up system, right, then what's the point of doing this anyways? And so it's not just enough to have all the ICP alignment and the traffic generation. If you also don't have dedicated resources who are willing to invest in the leads that get generated, you're going to be wasting your time and money. And so it's really like a vision of what's possible, and certain companies get it and see it, as well as the ICP alignment and ability to drive traffic.
That is awesome. Peter was telling me that you have developed like a complete process around, how you drive these, especially virtual platform-based engagement, whether it's a webinar, whether it's a networking session that are using social media. Can you kind of walk us through what that framework is? Because I think it's pretty unique. I haven't seen anybody driving it that way.
Yeah, funny enough, I just did a PGA session. So with HubSpot, it's called their Partner Growth Accelerator program. And so they brought me in to teach their app partners exactly what we're talking about right now. I just finished that session a couple of days ago. And so it's kind of some fresh slides sitting behind the screen here. And so I would say there's two components to that without bringing up slides and doing a deep dive, because it was actually a 2 hour workshop I gave. But in essence, there's the construction of the event. There's a strategic way to build these go to market events where you have thought leadership sitting at the top. You make that, well, because HubSpot gives MDF, I was recommending go spend that. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say how much, but whatever that number is, go spend that MDF on like the highest, best influencer with the most amount of visibility. Because what you want to do is you want to position your events as these must see, must know, must attend, who often could be high level engaged people in your particular space. Or if there's like an author that everybody knows, likes, and trusts, and that would just be a big draw, you got to center your event structure around some sort of high attention grabbing keynote speaker. And if they also happen to be in your market and are able to drive influence and traffic, even better. Really great money spent. And then think of yourself and your 2, 3, 4, 5, and sometimes my case, like 15 partners as sub sponsors who are supporting the event. Because once you have the attention, it's about what I say, attention retention. Grab their attention. And then once they're in the session, and then the second part of the system, besides the actual strategic design of the events, is actually a tool I created that helps as people register. And if anybody's been through my events, they know that there's a set of like strategic, easy to answer questions that as you register feels natural, feels aligned, feels personalized, feels beneficial, right? It's not a survey. It's not a lead scoring field type demo questions. It's like, this is for you. I've designed this system so that way, as people register, you can find out what their pain points, what their interests are. Because I think, like I said on the HubSpot PGA workshop, I was like, all right, you all sat down together and you created your joint value proposition. That's part of being a part of their program. Everybody knows how to create a joint value proposition. I said, do you know how to create a joint lead discovery system? And so that's where this comes in. It's a session design and then joint lead discovery system. So that way, as people register, you know who's here for what. That way you can then route leads to those who have interest, demand, ability, and budget to buy you or your products, your partner's products or services.
That is pretty awesome. So I want to double click a little bit about, kind of where things are at, because you're like, as a millennial, taking kind of a Gen Z social approach. And so, it's a new way, because I haven't really seen in our space. And when I mean by in our space, we're predominantly in tech and manufacturing. So when you listen to Jim McBain, right, he talks about 75% of the worldwide GDP, like 100 trillion, 75 trillion of it flowing through the channel. But the two that we're in, which is tech, about 6 trillion, and manufacturing, which is about 16 trillion. Which of those two bubbles, like, or sectors, are you in focus right now?
Well, what I've learned, maybe the hard way, but maybe also intuitively, is when you're starting a small business or you're starting a partner program. I think when you're starting anything, you got to start small, you got to start niche, you got to start focus, and you got to see where you're going to get traction, because you just sometimes don't know where the market and the message and the product market fit, all that stuff. Whether you're marketing, it's message to market match. If it's product market fit. You're always trying to discover, you're in a phase of discovery. Where can I be massively successful in a way that fits my company size, fits my budget, fits my ability to stay as a long-term viable option? And so for me, where that works, and if you can tell, as a small one person at the currently solopreneur, I have to be hyper focused on the people I can reach, the people who, and these are actually the answer to this question is the answer every partner program answers is like, well, who do I partner with? Well, you're going to partner with people who match the audience you're trying to reach, who have the ability to reach them, have a willingness to reach them, are easy to work with, and you have an ability to demonstrate and generate results in a, I would say, reasonable / fast period of time. So when I took that combination of who's right there in front of me, the answer was quite simple. The partnership leaders community, B2B SaaS, I would say SMB, maybe a little bit of mid-market. In fact, I'm watching as my systems improve and the audience I reach increases, companies previously where I was working with companies under $1 million, which is kind of almost nothing, is now 10 million, 40 million. and currently reaching into maybe $120 million companies. And so, like, naturally, as your systems or as your program or as your product or as your service or as your partner program gets better and more sophisticated, so too, I think, will your audience and your ability to expand beyond your initial starting point. And so for me, I started super small. Like, my first deal was $500, right? Like, in fact, last year at this time, I was like, hey, I just made $500 from my first partnership deal. And let me just tell you, it's increased by not 1,000, 100 times since then. But I think surviving on $500 deals is not something any of us really want to do. And I quickly figured that out. And also, naturally, and thankfully, the market also caught up to where the market actually helped me increase my value versus me raising my prices.
That's the power of the network. Let's talk a little bit about, if you look at like a sub $50 million brand that's going to market, and then if you look at like 100 to $250 million, let's kind of stay in those two segments. What needs do you have from a partner management perspective that they are struggling or they are grappling with?
I'm starting to love the sweet spot, because honestly, like, there's a level of complexity inside of companies as they grow, and there's a correlation of that complexity to, like, the number of employees and revenue. And so currently for me, there's the sweet spot that I'm in. I really love working with companies probably between 10 million and 50 million, right? They're not too big where they've got like huge legal review and 7 different people who have to approve something. And like, because speed, and when you're small, speed is so important. And when you're bigger, stability is more important. Protecting what you have, right? Making sure that you don't say something incorrectly that makes 10 other people look bad, right? But when you're small, you can be fast and nimble. And I think that's another just principle, whether it's, and I would almost consider myself like a startup partner program first before I even look at, like, if I really look at what my company is at its, and I've been trying to think about this, and you're really bringing this out of me for the first time, is like, I'm not a startup entrepreneur media company. I'm actually a startup partner program. I'm actually a startup partner marketing program that happens to then, instead of being paid a salary, I have to go ask each partner to contribute a certain amount of money to fund this particular exercise together. But in essence, I'm actually a partner marketer / partner marketing startup that's going in and helping align across all these organizations. And so for someone at my size, with the resources and skill and systems that I have in place, if I'm not moving fast and forward every day, it feels like I'm losing traction. And so finding companies who have that same kind of cadence is super important. And think about it for anybody else listening right now, is like, if you're a partner manager and you want to work with another company, like, what's a better experience? A big, huge company, the big whale that's going to be like amazing potentially, that if we could just get them to do these 3 things, but it takes months, right? And we all know, like, momentum is so important. And without momentum, right, we get lost and things don't happen. So there's just like a size of company relevancy. Choose companies that are of relative size and speed that also have the opportunities that you guys can commonly share. And so I'm using those same lenses to view the world as a partner, as a solo partner marketer agency.
So that's awesome. So Justin, let's talk a little bit about partner playbooks. What's in it?
Well, it's currently an event-based medium company that goes off and helps small to medium-size businesses at this point reach into a particular audience. In this case, currently, it is the partnership tech space, trying to reach partner managers, partner marketers, right? Again, keeping my niche and concentration around a particular audience. And then from there, I work with each one of those different companies to help them understand, well, are you competitive with this company, or are you collaborative? And if you're competitive, where's the competition? And what doesn't the market know about your product or service that it should? Because everybody's got some level of overlap, and some level of like very distinct value. And so I go and I meet with these different partner tech companies, and sometimes solutions providers, to help them create the language of differentiation that then helps them get to market in a clear way that lets the audiences know which products or services for them. And essentially, that's what marketing does. And then, instead of every company trying to have their own webinar, their own go-to-market motion, their own LinkedIn channel, their own podcast, right, their own copywriter, like, if you look at all of the individual roles and titles and responsibilities that need to go into this, I offer a what you would call a collective fractionalized cost approach. And I had one of the little things I wrote down here is I'm really able to magnify and multiply the results at a fraction of the cost, because everybody doesn't need like a super sophisticated air meet, platform that's super dialed in. I set this all up for like the group environment for the pod, and then they leverage almost a fractional amount of those services, and then everybody benefits. And essentially, I think the thing that people see most is on the front end is when I'm able to bring together 10 different audiences and generate 12, 13, 14, 17, 1800 registrants to an event. And so because of the orchestration, because of my own list, because I understand all the players and different people's schedules and marketing alignment, all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes that really makes this possible, that normally one single person working at one company does not have the cover to go execute on because they're distracted by 10 other things. I'm able to focus on these three key things that's able to drive big numbers on the front end and the follow-up and systems on the back end that no one single company is ever going to understand, figure out, or invest in, because they just have all these other priorities. And so I sit in the center of allowing everybody to go deep, not wide, and together.
So last event that you ran, I saw almost 350 people attended. And so can you kind of walk us through the mechanics of it without maybe giving away your secrets? So share as much as you can, because it's quite amazing to see 350 people showing up for a webinar, which you ran for 4 or 5 hours. So
Yeah,
what's the magic there?
I'm happy to share everything because it's all execution. And execution, like I just said, if someone's willing to go hire like a full-time dedicated resource to do this, and you could find that person that knew what to do, how to do it, and orchestrate it, introduce me to that person because I want to work with them. But to my knowledge right now, currently, like, there's not many of those types of people out there. And so me sharing as much as I can, I think, will help people kind of at least get a sliver of something to know what's possible for themselves. And so I have no hesitations in divulging everything. And so getting 350 people to show up live on something is hard to do these days. Everyone's got 10 other things that are calling at their attention. They've got Instagram, they've got YouTube, they've got their boss, they've got Slack. And so this is the key psychological thing I can share right now with you, which is if you're not thinking in terms of I am a marketer and my number one goal as a partner person is what I call control the scroll. If you're not learning and thinking about how do I control the scroll, then you're missing out on the opportunity to do and get the results that I get. And so this is something I think about all the time. We're all marketers, and my goal is on every medium possible in the B2B environment, how can I acquire the permission and then deliver personalized, important, valuable messages through each one of the channels I get permission for. And so if you've been on any of my events, what you notice is that you'll register and of course I'll get an email address, because technically you can't register for an event on all the systems without an email address. But you'll also, and I see about 40% of the time, someone will share their telephone number. And so I built some systems that I'll go do a lookup and I'll see, is that telephone number a WhatsAppable number? I'll go ping the WhatsApp API. If it's a WhatsApp number, it goes into the WhatsApp bucket. If it's not a WhatsApp number, I'll ping the number again to see if it's a textable number. So now I've got email, WhatsApp, text message. For some people who raise their hand, there's also a Slack Connect group that I've created. And I've got a little bit of like marketing and messaging that drives people to my LinkedIn. And so controlling the scroll, how am I able to, in one market, we'll just say the whole surround your audience strategy concept from Nearbound. Well, my systems plus 3 or 4 of my top partners, when everybody's talking about this event and I know who the top performing partners in partnership space are, I get them aligned, I make a deal with them, I understand what's important to them, and I build that into my marketing engine. And then at the center of that marketing engine is this concept I said, control the scroll. I can then message at scale with personalized information I collect during the registration process to talk to people in a way that most marketers can't, most partnership people can't reach, and I'm able to drive attention through these personalized messages. And if the LinkedIn algorithm is not doing so well today, well, I can send 1,000 text messages. Hey, what's up, Sagata? Justin here. As a CEO of a partner tech company, I got 3 playbooks that I think you'd like to come check out. Would you like to hang out with me, Jay McBain, Greg la la la. And so you personalize these messages, and all of a sudden you're like, how can I say no to this? And so whether you saw my post on LinkedIn or not, maybe you did, maybe you signed up for it, or my email went to spam, maybe it didn't, maybe it didn't. Another channel that is available is text messaging or some of the other ones. And so, like, there's a strategic, human, and authentic way that I've built this. That way, people feel like they're connected with me, and I actually do truly care. I want people to enrich their lives, enrich their businesses, enrich their programs. And I know the only way to do that is to leverage personalization and multiple channels at scale.
That is simply awesome. So I would love to hear your vision, with all these agents and agentic platform coming in. Do you envision yourself like writing like a super, Zimmerman algo using some agents that actually does this for you as a mass scale, so you have a twin, like the Justin twin?
So I'm about as close as you can get to like the APIs that run this stuff as you can get without being a programmer. And I do sometimes at night, and I've had weeks on time where I'm reading API documentation to understand, is what I'm trying to do possible? And then I zoom out, and then I hire a developer and I say, hey, here's the thing I want to have done. And so from like a product development standpoint, I just see the agentic side of stuff taking over now. But from the copy and content perspective, there are actually some like limitations just based on the way, for instance, the WhatsApp API is designed and the HubSpot API is designed. Like, there's certain things currently that, like, not saying that they can't be solved for, especially where you have some sort of screen takeover version where I'm able to replicate myself and then say, hey, JZAI, go use this other computer here sitting on the desk. And so I do see from a language and modeling. And so for me, that's actually H2 is like, I'm really looking into here's probably the thing that I think everyone needs to hear about AI is like, when marketing automation came out, and you could like scale things through clicks and conversions. Like, if you didn't have a strong understanding of what you were automating, then you were just automating garbage, right? You weren't automating in a way that was going to be effective. You were being efficient, but you were being efficient at being ineffective. And AI is to some degree the same thing right now. Is like, unless you know the outcome that you're trying to achieve, and you can prompt design, know which platforms work with which AI, and like how to actually orchestrate like and coming back to where orchestrate is like taking a step back, and I see myself orchestrating the AI to do the things that I need to do, but I have to have, or anybody who's going to employ an AI agent has to have an understanding of what do they want the AI to orchestrate for them that gets the results, right? And so if you don't know what results are already possible doing what you're already doing, adding AI to help you get an outcome that you can't instruct it to do or don't know what to look for. If you don't know what good is, how can you tell it to know what great might be? And so for me, there's still the process of, you have to be somewhat of an expert in your field in order for you to expertly instruct your AI agents to, again, work on your behalf. Because I think that's the promise of all this, is like all those little clicks and tasks and follow-up things that would go to VAs, and like, you can now start to separate yourself from that if you know essentially how to hire an AI agent to do the work that you would love to have done for you, but we haven't figured out how to get quite that far yet.
So let's talk a little bit about performance. Let's go back to the metric you kind of alluded to. I want to kind of unpack that. So you said a couple of thousand registered, 350 to 400 showed up, and you have these tactics now across WhatsApp, Slack, email, LinkedIn, and are there maybe there are other social media like Reels or others you're using? So can you kind of break down the metrics where you see the engagement happening today? And then do you see like clustering of it? Once they sign up, do they tend to go to a one channel versus another?
Yeah, so we'll call them properties at this point. So there's channels, there's partners, there's channels, and there's properties. And I would say I started with one channel and one property, and I've started to expand into others. And so I'll start with the basics. Channel number one, I had no email list. And like I said, every single marketer, every single partner person should be building an email list of whoever their audience is, right? To control the scroll, control their attention, control the outcomes, right? That's why we all want to be on LinkedIn. That's why we all want to have the algorithm favor us. Well, sometimes the algorithm's not. And so how can you put yourself in control? And so 2 or 3 years ago, didn't have an email list, As a marketer, I know email list is absolutely essential because you want to be able to message people how you want to message them, when you want, and in the ways that matter to you without being told what to do or who you can reach. Spam filters, and of course, play a role in that. And so I started on LinkedIn, channel number one. I went to LinkedIn and I started talking about things that are relevant, not irrelevant, relevant at the top of the funnel. And it's the marketing exercise to get people's interest, to get people's engagement, to position myself, my brand, my company, my products, my services, which products and services didn't exist at the time. So, but it was just, again, starting with brand. You can start with brand and then start to build an email list to property number one. Property number one, we'll call it a webinar platform, a webinar series, right? Very, very simple, very low cost. Post about stuff that matters to your audience on channel number one, drive traffic to property number one, and then repeat and start to understand what message and alignment works and drives that. And then as your email list grows, right, so does your ability to then rely not necessarily less on social, but now you have more control over how much audience you can reach at any one point in time. We'll flip the script a little bit and now say property number two, now that I'm 2 years, 3 years into this, and I'm sure I could do it in 18 months now. Property number two I'm starting to look at is, and this is, I think, where most people start, and I think this is the old way of doing it, and I think the new way is LinkedIn to events, and then build your event list up, and then build your website up. And I know this is kind of speaking from the point of view of like a solopreneur, and there's other ways to do it, but maybe you can even think of your partner program in the same way. And so now that I have 130 different sessions and videos and playbooks, and I've got approaching a very highly engaged 10,000 person email list and a very highly engaged LinkedIn following, so 2 channels, LinkedIn and email, I now know enough, have enough, and have done enough to then start up this next property, which is going to be the place in which it can be its own inbound destination that generates its own interest and its own conversions. And that's a whole other conversation. So for me, that's kind of the future of where things go and the progression of how to get there.
So when you started out, did you have this sort of framework already in mind, or how much of this evolved over the last year?
I kind of did. Yeah. I mean, I was the director of partnerships and I was the director of marketing at 2 different companies. And so this is just the combination of those 2 things coming together, financed slowly off of a American Express blue business card. So thank you, American Express. Couldn't be here without you. Seriously.
That is quite awesome. So let's kind of go forward and thinking ahead next 12 months. What's in your mind? What do you want to make happen? And how do you think, is there an economic slowdown coming? If there is one, right? Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Like what should partner leaders should do, thinking through next kind of 12 to 18 months horizon?
Just talking about this like 8, 9 months ago when inflation was starting to peak and we had unemployment skyrocketing. We were coming out of the pandemic, and so things got good for a while, and I'm happy for that. That conversation around contraction and budgets, contraction decreased, budgets have increased. Things, if you want to call it, are back to new normal or normal. And so my answer, side note, is I had to think about that because I started this like at the bottom, like when it was the hardest, most difficult. And I just said, principally speaking, and I think everyone should be looking at this, principally speaking, economically, principally speaking, like what are you doing? And I come back to this, what are you doing to multiply your results at fractions of the cost? And I don't see how things get, and the only other thing that I could add to this is actually the agenic side to it, but even minus the agenic side, without this, the accelerated ability to generate more, faster, or better through AI, you still have to go back to principles and say, well, we're still trying to reach people, we're still trying to sell them. How can we do this together as an alliance, as a partner pod, going to market, trying to quadruple, quintuple our ability to reach and drive leads, and then sharing in the cost. And so from like an economic standpoint, the same advice I've been following and principles I've been following for myself, I think other companies should be looking at the same thing and saying, how can we partner up with our best partners and create a moat around our audiences? And if something bad happens, isn't better together kind of one of the only ways to do it? Like, what other options do you have to go to market and to drive new leads, new revenue? Because the average normal way to do it, the direct way, more salespeople, more SDRs, that didn't work out. And so Sure, I know AI is going to play a big role, and we're going to have 10x SDRs and 10 product designers and 10x marketers. And if you can find those people, hire them. But again, like economic and macro conditions, when they contract, you just have to get like more cost effective. And what's the most cost effective way to go to market is to find partners who have similar. This goes back to how I got into the business in 2007, is find companies who have customers that match your ICP, that are non-competing, that are easy, willing, and wanting to work with you. And like that's kind of always going to be true. That's how we survived as tribes and people from resources and building out farming and agriculture. We've always just come together to work together towards a common goal, and better together has been the human story for as long as we've had a civilization. And so when things get tough, we get tougher and we come closer together and we find better, more cost efficient ways. And I think if we start thinking about that now and looking into the next 4, 5, 6 months and saying, who else in my partner sphere matches these criteria? How can we start a small pilot program to build some of these things out?
I agree with you. I had a guest last year when that inflation was sort of everywhere. People were talking about it, economic slowdown, and etc. And he made a point which resonated. He said, "Hey, look, there's a $100 trillion economy. Instead of 2.8% a year growing, maybe we'll grow 1.8%. Still, you got to have a motion in marketing motion, partner motion, sales motion, CS motion to support the 100 trillion, right? So why bother about 1 trillion slowdown? Why not focus on 100 trillion and just get better, because your competition possibly is worrying about, and you don't worry, you just get better through execution. And that's kind of what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah, just timeless business principles is like, don't focus on what the competition is doing, focus on what you're doing, right? Keep your eye on what's important to you and your customers. And we've seen it every single economic cycle. I mean, I'm old enough to have seen 3 or 4 of them now, and at this point it's just, be prepared for the unprepared. And the way you do that is by creating great alliances, and either internally, like you can also think about it that way, is an internally strong, partnered, cultured company is probably as equal to and as good as, and probably better than having a bunch of external partners. And so I think, maybe looking internally at the company culture. Oh gosh, this opens up. I've had conversations with CEO and presidents of blankety blank and whatnot, and companies are like, oh my God, things are slowing down. And then we talk about the company culture, and that ultimately becomes like one of the first places to look at, because if you can't make your internal people motivated, fit, faster, more willing to grow and move to the next level, that's probably the answer, is like all the best partners in the world. That's only going to band-aid a leaky bucket of cultural malaise, that if you don't fix that, that's going to erode your company. And just the macroeconomic forces are just going to show you what's wrong with your company faster and bigger, that previously, maybe when the money was good or things were flowing, you didn't have to worry about or fix because they were growing. And now you have to say, oh, well, you know what? This is and everybody knows what I'm talking about, those internal problems. And we ignore them for the sake of growth, but we don't focus on that internal stuff that is ultimately what's going to hold the company together through tough times.
So Justin, we have about a minute left. So in 60 seconds, if you want to describe like one thing that you're most excited about over the next 12 months.
At the heart, I'm a copywriting nerd. I love just figuring out great ways to create messaging that matter to people. And with the advent of all this multi-channel ability and personalization and AI, being able to create, a fantastic, I would call it, messaging system that allows, almost, I would call it a community approach to marketing and partnerships that's never been done before. And how do you create an aligned framework? And that's actually what I'm working on. And it goes beyond the minute request you've given me to fit it all in. But I believe that in the future, and this is where I'm going to go, 2026, the rest of 2025 for me is finishing up the model inside of the partnership tech space to then look broadly and say, how can other industries succeed borrowing from these principles and systems that I've built to then go to market together better, faster, cheaper, more effectively at fractions of the cost?
Wow. What an amazing way to end our discussion. Justin, I sincerely thank you for being here. I look forward to seeing you in Austin. We have an incredible panel and look forward to working with you. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.